Vedanta that the Bhagavad Gita endows us with. After that, you can stay in the world, you can live in the world, you can transact with the world, you can do what you like in the world like Krishna did. But you are not dependent on the world at all. Your sustenance, your nourishment, your nutrition is derived from the spirit which never changes. That's the difference. So this is true in the absolute sense and in the relative. To the extent you avail of these values, to the extent you establish yourself in this knowledge, to that extent you become less susceptible, vulnerable to the influences of the world. It's like this. When you put raw, uncooked food into hot oil, what happens? It splutters. It sizzles. There's a reaction. But once the food gets cooked, nothing. There's no sizzling, there's no spluttering. If you don't believe me, go home this evening and try it. That's what it is. So we undeveloped people are like uncooked, immature individuals, and we are thrown into the oil of the world, hot oil of the world. We are spluttering, we're reacting, all kinds of things happen to us. But a mature individual, a self-realized soul, when he's put into the world, nothing happens to him. And typical example is that of Krishna. He went through the most horrendous experiences and he came out of them cheerful, full of life, full of dynamism, unscathed, unaffected. If you and I were to go through 1% of what he went through, we'd all get into depression. So that person has no reason to act or not act and does not depend on anything, anyone for anything. This is something that this value we must need to inculcate. That I must be independent of the world. I must learn to stand on my own 2 feet and not be like a creeper, constantly leaning on someone or something all the time. 19.
Tasmadasakta satatam karyam karma samachara asakto hyacharan karma paramapnoti purushaha.
In this verse he concludes the portion where he gives the perfect reasoning why a person should act in the world. And in this verse he concludes, Tasmat, therefore, always perform obligatory actions without attachment. One who acts without attachment, paramapnoti purushaha, reaches that state of the Supreme. It's a beautiful verse which summarizes the whole thing. Tasmat asakta sadatam karyam karma samachara. Always perform your obligatory actions. Karyam karma. Satatam. No holidays. You can't say, so many years I've been taking care of my family. Now 1 year I'll take chutti and look after myself. No. Can't do that. Satatam. Always. How does this inspiration, this enthusiasm come to constantly do one's obligatory duties? It comes from an awareness of all that you have received in life. When you understand that what you've received in life, either from that divine power or from people around you, various agencies around you, you become so overwhelmed, you're so grateful for what you have received that the accent shifts. You shift track from what is known as deficiency motivation to abundancy motivation. All of us are driven to act. We're driven mad by this feeling of deficiency. What motivates us to action? I don't have this. A person who goes to work says, I don't have a car, I only have a 2-wheeler. Because I don't have a car, I am driven to action. And then somehow or the other I get the car. The moment I get the car, what happens? Are you happy? No. The accent shifts to something else that I don't have. And thus, right through life, we are driven by this deficiency motivation. Therefore, right through life, we are unhappy. Right through life, we feel deficient. All our lives, we are driven insane by this feeling of inadequacy within us. Instead, when you understand that you are so blessed in life, you feel a sense of adequacy. You feel that yes, I have received so much in life, that if there is one little thing lacking, it's okay, you don't even focus on it. Then why do you act? You act for achievement of the transcendental. You understand you have everything in life. This feeling of adequacy is portrayed so beautifully in the scriptures. Sudama is a wonderful example of that. Sudama had reached the state of, in this state where he was not motivated by a feeling of inadequacy. He felt completely adequate, fulfilled within himself. Yet he had nothing in the world, poverty stricken. And when his wife told him to go and ask Krishna for a favor, he went, met Krishna, enjoyed his company, came away without asking. Not only did he not ask, even when the wife told him to go and ask him for something, he only thought of giving. He said, Krishna likes poha, why don't you make some poha for him? The wife gave up on him. It's this feeling of abundancy. You must understand the difference in your state of mind, difference in the actions that you perform. When you're driven by a sense of deficiency, inadequacy, you perform actions which are inefficient. Everything will go wrong with whatever you do. Because there's no dedication, there's no feeling supporting it. But when you function out of this adequacy, abundancy, everything you do will be as an act of dedication, will be an act of worship. And therefore you will get success. So, tasmat satatam, always. Karyam karma samachara. Samyak achara means perform it well, perform it completely, perform it perfectly. This sense of perfection in action is not there in us at all. Somehow or the other, sloppy, disorganized, indisciplined actions. Samyak achara. For one who acts, and that too you must do it without attachment. Why will you do anything without attachment? How can you do something without attachment? Because you are attached to the higher, because you understand the utter futility of worldly pursuits. You have access to that which is more permanent. It's like this. You may have read in the papers about a sportsman getting a Ferrari as a gift, right? So, you read it, and you've been reading it, you've been listening to the news, etc. There's a lot of debate over it. And then one fine day when you go to sleep, you dream that you have been gifted a Ferrari. And you're so thrilled. Why? Because in real life you have only a Maruti 800. Maruti 800 to Ferrari is quite a jump. So you're so thrilled, so happy. And you are called for the ceremony to hand over the car to you, and you go there and the car is beautifully, there's a ribbon tied to the car and things like that. And a dignitary is there to hand over the keys to you. And you are about to go up on stage on the dais to pick up the keys of the car when, because of your anxiety to go and grab the keys, what happens? You trip and you fall. Now what happens? You've lost sight completely. Where is all this happening? In the dream. In the dream, when you trip, what happens? You wake up. After waking up, However much you value a Ferrari, will you have any interest, any desire to go back into the same dream to collect a Ferrari? No. Yet, suppose you had this capability of getting back into the same dream. You re-enter the dream at the same point. You've tripped, you pick yourself up. What will you do? How will you act? You have to act because you've gone back into the dream. How will you do it? You'll go up to the stage, you'll collect the keys, you'll get into the car, you'll drive away. Whether there's a debate on whether you have to pay, what is that? Custom duty or not, you go through it without any interest. But you'll do your actions perfectly. Without interest. That's what he's saying here. Without attachment. This is what it is. In a movie recently, in a Hollywood movie, they show a person who's put in prison for whatever reason. And when he's in prison, his focus is only on getting out of prison because he understands his life in the prison is temporary. His life in the prison is false. His life in the prison is illusory. He's not interested in anything that happens there. He's completely detached from all prison activities because his attention is on somehow or the other to get out of that prison as quickly as possible. You and I have entered this prison of the world. And having entered the prison, we've got totally involved, totally attached here. And nobody is so much as even thinking of getting out of this prison. Like in that movie, all the other prisoners were quite content. They got completely involved in prison activities. This is the difference. You must understand that as long as you are in the world, you are in a prison. Your real life is not here. It's beyond this. This is only your real life. Your real life is beyond. So this vision when you have, you perform obligatory duties, you have no desires. And how do you perform them? Without attachment. Somewhere or the other we miss. Either we don't perform obligations, or if we perform obligations, it's with complete attachment. 20.
कर्मणैव हि संसिद्धिम् आस्थिता जनकादयः लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि.
Having given the intellectual appeal to act, Krishna finds that Arjuna is still not fully convinced. And so therefore, he has a backup system. And this backup system is this emotional support system. He now needles him emotionally to get into activity. So what he's saying here is, only by action, karmanaiva, did Janaka and others reach perfection. Janaka was Arjuna's role model. Therefore, you should also act for what? Loka sangraha, for the well-being of the world. So, there are 6 emotional points that he gives out to Arjuna to get him to act, just as we saw yesterday. When India made a pitch for the Commonwealth Games, intellectual approach was tried, all kinds of approaches were tried, it didn't work. And finally, one last-ditch attempt, this great, highly emotional appeal that Anjali Bhagwat made, did the trick. We got it. And therefore, we are going to be watching the Commonwealth Games in 2010. Right? So, this is it. Having failed to goad him into activity intellectually, he now tries the emotional approach. What does he say? He says he appeals to his devotion to a role model. Fortunately for us in our culture, in the past we have great men and women who have appeared on the horizon, on the scene, and provided us with role models to aspire for and reach, follow them. And Janaka was one such person. Janaka was man of realization, yet he was a king and he went through his kingly duties to perfection, every little bit he did. So Krishna is appealing to Arjuna. He says, if Janaka could have acted, and he reached that state through action, having reached that state of realization, he continued to act. Therefore, you should also. This is the first point. And in this verse, the second point, the power of persuasion, he says, you should also act for loka sangraha. Arjuna was a leader, was a prince, and the leader, one of the most important attributes of a leader is that he should set aside his selfish interests and work for loka sangraha, for the welfare of the community. If you don't have this basic intention, you cannot be a leader. And if you're already in a leadership position, you lose it. So he's appealing to him. Arjuna was basically sacrificial. He was concerned about the welfare of people. He was interested in resurrecting righteousness in society. It's just a temporary aberration that he's got into. So Krishna needles him there and says, look, you are a prince. Your basic obligation as a leader is to work for the welfare of the people. You have no business to think of your personal interests. Even in corporate life, the higher you go, the greater is the responsibility on you to take care of the whole organization. And if you don't meet with that, you lose the position of leadership. So the second appeal is persuasion. And then he goes through in the following verses, in the coming verses, to the other 6. For now we move to verse 21.
यद्यदाचरति श्रेष्ठः तत्तदेवेतरो जनः स यत्प्रमाणं कुरुते लोकस्तदनुवर्तते.
This is one of the famous verses of the Gita, which says, people follow whatever a person of excellence does. Shreshtha. Whatever a leader does, others follow. The world emulates the standard set by such a one. When he says this, he is boosting Arjuna as a leader. He's saying, Arjuna, you are a leader. Whatever you do, everyone else will follow. Which means that you have a responsibility. Even if you don't feel like doing it, you have to live up to a certain standard. When he tells Arjuna this, he's telling all of us that we belong to the educated elite. We are the leaders of society. Whatever we do, everybody else follows. And therefore, there is this added responsibility on us to uphold certain values. The leader must be a role model. As a leader, first of all, you must have the courage and conviction to uphold your values and stick by them. Ensure that righteousness prevails in your own little sphere of activity, which each one of us is more than capable of doing. So for which you need two things. You must be established in the values, and you must have a powerful intellect to implement these values in society. Then you must basically be inspired by a higher cause. You must have that vision, and you must follow it up with action. So whatever the leader does, yad acharati shreshtha, whatever the leader does, everybody else follows. So remember one thing, in any society, it is the intellectual class, the Brahmins of society, who have brought about evolution, who have sustained certain values in life, who have ensured that righteousness prevails in society. You can't expect the people lower down to follow certain values. You have to uphold these values. So therefore there is a responsibility on us. Why is there degradation in society? Because it's the educated class who have lost their values. It is you and I who have lost the values. That's why there's degradation in society. So what we need to do is to, again, focus on ourselves, empower ourselves with values, and abide by them. Must have the courage and conviction to stand up for what you think is right, not succumb. If all of us succumb, what will happen? So therefore, this is a very important quality, and we do one last verse for today, 22.
न मे पार्थास्ति कर्तव्यम् त्रिषु लोकेषु किञ्चन नानवाप्तमवाप्तव्यम् वर्त एव च कर्मणि.
Now, in this verse, he inspires confidence by giving the personal appeal, and he says, I have no duty, O Partha, son of Prutha, nor is there anything to be gained in these three worlds that has not been obtained. Still, I continue to act. Krishna tells Arjuna, look, I am in the state where I don't need to act. I have no duty to perform because I am not a stakeholder in the world, as I don't depend on it for anything. Nor is there anything to be gained. I don't need to gain anything that I don't have already. I've reached the state of fulfillment. Yet, I'm constantly acting. And Krishna has acted this principle out in life. Right through his life, he was dynamic, active. But all his actions were geared towards loka sangraha, for the welfare of people. He went as an ambassador of the Pandavas to Duryodhana to appeal to his sense, not to get into the battle, when he had no stake in it whatsoever. He did all kinds of things. And right in the end, he was Arjuna's charioteer. He was in the middle of bang in the middle of the Mahabharata war, when he had nothing to do with it. And then with this works, you see. When you tell somebody, look, I'm doing it, why don't you do it? This persuasion has an effect on people. It's like this. You invite somebody over, someone comes and visits you in the office. Say, what will you have? Tea, coffee? The first thing, sometimes they say, no, thank you. Then you say, I'm having it. Why don't you have? Instantly the person says, okay, I'll also have. Now this is an emotional appeal. If a person is rational, he'll say, you have what you want, what does it have to do with me? But it works. And this kind of emotional appeal is what all marketers do in their advertising campaigns. You must understand that. They are getting you emotionally. If you understand it, then you can call their bluff. If you don't understand, you succumb. So, what he say? I have no duty, O Partha, nor is there anything to be gained in these three worlds that has not been obtained. Still, I continue to act. And for the rest of the verses, what happens at the end of this emotional appeal, we'll find out tomorrow at 6:30. Thank you.